He wrote one book that got him exiled, hated, and banned by the church. But 500 years later, every leader still follows his advice in secret. In 1513, a man sat alone in a small farmhouse outside Florence, Italy. He'd lost everything. His job, his power, his reputation. He'd even been tortured. And in that dark moment, he wrote down the truth that no one else dared to say out loud, that nice guys don't win, that morality is a game, that what people see matters more than what's real. His name was Niccolo Machiavelli. And what he understood about power will make you see the world completely differently. Here's the thing. We all want to believe that being good leads to success, that honesty wins, that kindness is rewarded, that if you just do the right thing, everything works out. It's a nice story, we tell it to kids. We repeat it to ourselves. But Machiavelli watched the real world and saw something else entirely. He saw that the people who win aren't the most moral. They're the ones who understand how power actually works. And power doesn't care about your intentions. It only cares about results. And results come from understanding one simple truth. People don't see reality. They see what they want to see. And if you control what they see, you control everything. Let me paint you a picture. Renaissance Italy. No unified country yet. Just city-states constantly fighting each other. Florence, Milan, Venice, Rome, all scheming and betraying and making alliances that would break the next week. In this chaos, Machiavelli worked as a diplomat. He met princes, popes, and kings. He watched them play the game of power up close. And he noticed something fascinating. The leaders who tried to be genuinely good usually lost. They got betrayed. They got conquered. They got pushed aside by more ruthless people. But the leaders who appeared good while being ruthless, they thrived. They stayed in power. They expanded their territories. They won. Machiavelli saw this pattern over and over. So he asked himself a dangerous question. What if morality is just a tool? What if the real game isn't about being good, but about seeming good? This was heresy. This was the kind of thinking that could get you killed. Because everyone pretended that rulers were supposed to be virtuous, honest, and just. That was the official story. But Machiavelli decided to write down what he actually saw, the truth behind the mask. He wrote it all in a short book called The Prince. And in that book, he laid out the rules of power that everyone used but no one admitted. One of his most famous lines goes like this: "Everyone sees what you appear to be. Few experience what you really are. And those few will not dare to oppose the many who have the image of the ruler on their side." Read that again. Everyone sees your appearance. Only a few see the reality. And those few can't do anything because the masses believe the image. This is brutal. But think about how true it is. How many politicians smile and shake hands and talk about caring for the people while doing completely opposite things behind closed doors? How many companies advertise about values and ethics while cutting corners everywhere? How many people in your own life present themselves as one thing but are totally different when no one is watching? Machiavelli understood that image is power, because people make decisions based on what they believe, not what's true. And if you can control what they believe about you, you can control their decisions. He took this further. He said that a ruler must appear to be compassionate, faithful, humane, honest, and religious. Appear, not be. Appear because, actually, being all these things all the time makes you weak. It makes you predictable. It makes you vulnerable. But appearing to have these qualities, while being flexible enough to do what's necessary. That's the key to staying in power. Now, here's where it gets really dark. Machiavelli said it's better to be feared than loved if you can't be both. But, and this is critical, you must avoid being hated. Fear keeps people in line. Love makes them loyal until something better comes along. But hatred makes them want to destroy you. So the trick is to be feared but not hated. Respected but not soft. Strong but not cruel for cruelty's sake. Always with a reason. Always with purpose. Never random. Because random cruelty makes people hate you. Calculated strength makes them respect you. He also understood something about generosity that nobody talks about. He said being too generous is actually bad for a ruler. Why? Because if you're too generous, you'll run out of resources. Then you'll have to tax people heavily to keep being generous. And then they'll hate you for the taxes more than they loved you for the gifts. But if you're a little bit stingy, people will complain at first. But you'll have resources. And when you do give something, even something small, it'll mean more. It'll seem like a big deal. The rare gift is worth more than the constant handout. This is cold, but watch how the world works, and tell me he's wrong. The companies that give constant bonuses eventually have to cut them, and everyone gets upset. The parents who give their kids everything raise entitled brats. The friends who always say yes eventually burn out and disappear. Scarcity creates value, even in kindness. Machiavelli also wrote about something he called virtue. This is hard to translate, but it basically means the ability to do whatever the situation requires. Not being locked into one way of thinking or acting. If the situation calls for mercy, show mercy. If it calls for strength, be strong. If it calls for deception, deceive. The key is being flexible enough to match the moment. He tells this story about Cesare Borgia, a prince who took over a region that was full of crime and chaos. Borgia appointed a cruel governor to clean it up. The governor did. He was brutal and ruthless, and made everyone obey through fear. Once order was restored, Borgia had the governor publicly executed. He blamed all the cruelty on the governor, and appeared as the merciful prince who ended the tyranny. Genius, right? Borgia got the results he needed through cruelty but maintained his image as a good ruler. The people celebrated him. He won completely. That's pure Machiavelli. Use whatever tool you need, but never let the tool damage your image. Now, let's be clear about something. Machiavelli wasn't saying be evil for fun. He wasn't saying hurt people just because you can. He was saying that if you want power, if you want to keep power, you have to be willing to do what's necessary, even when it's not nice. And you have to be smart enough to maintain the appearance of being good while doing it. So how does this apply to your life? Because you're not running a kingdom. You're not conquering cities. But you are playing the game whether you know it or not. And if you don't understand the rules, you're losing. Think about your job. The person who works the hardest doesn't always get promoted. The person who appears the most valuable does. The person who manages their image, who takes credit properly, who shows up in the right way at the right time, that's who moves up. Think about relationships. The person who's always available, always giving, always accommodating doesn't get respect. They get taken for granted. But the person who has boundaries, who's selective with their time and energy, who maintains a bit of mystery, they're the ones people chase. Think about social media. Nobody posts their failures, their boring days, their real struggles. They post the highlight reel, the image, and that image becomes their reality in other people's minds. That's Machiavelli in action. Control the image, control the perception, control the outcome. Here's the uncomfortable truth. You're already doing this. You dress a certain way for job interviews. You act differently in front of your boss than you do with your friends. You curate your social media. You tell people what they want to hear, sometimes instead of what you really think. You're already managing your image. Machiavelli just says, do it consciously, do it strategically, do it effectively. The difference between you and someone who understands Machiavelli is that they know they're playing the game. They know that perception matters more than reality in most situations. They know that appearing strong is often more important than being strong. They know that the person who controls the narrative controls the outcome. But here's the warning. Machiavelli also knew that if your mask slips, if people see the gap between your image and your reality, you're done. The appearance only works if it's consistent, if it's believable, if you can maintain it under pressure. This is why fake people eventually get exposed. They can't maintain the act when things get hard. Their true nature shows through. But someone who truly understands Machiavelli, they build an image that's close enough to reality that it's sustainable. They're not pretending to be something completely different. They're emphasizing certain traits and hiding others. They're curating, not lying. And that's the real lesson. You don't have to be perfectly good. You don't have to be perfectly honest. You don't have to show everyone everything about yourself. In fact, you shouldn't. What you need is to understand what people need to see from you, to trust you, respect you, or follow you. And then you give them that. Consistently, Machiavelli got exiled for telling the truth about power. The church banned his book. People called him evil. But 500 years later, his book is still studied in military academies, business schools, and political science courses everywhere. Why? Because he was right. The people with power understand this. They've always understood this. They smile for the cameras while making hard decisions behind closed doors. They appear compassionate while being calculated. They seem accessible while being completely controlled. And it works. Every single time. The question isn't whether you'll use these principles. You already are. The question is whether you'll use them consciously or unconsciously. Whether you'll be the person controlling your image or the person whose image controls them. Machiavelli didn't invent these rules. He just wrote them down. The game was already being played. He just explained how to win. Watch the next one to go even deeper.